Hello and welcome back to another episode of Video Game Details, the series where we take a look at some of the cooler things you may not have noticed in your favourite games. In today's episode, we discover what happens when you chuck a glass bottle at someone's face in The Last of Us Part 2, we clean our sword in the coolest way possible in Ghost of Tsushima, and we once again follow the rules of the road, this time in Burnout Paradise. As always, if you think you know of a detail that I'm yet to cover, then the best place to let me know is in the comments section or on my social media accounts, the links to which are in the description. Oh, and if you are enjoying this series, then a like is really appreciated. Anyway, without further delay, let's get started. So in episode 12 of this series, we discovered that when you have a destination set in your GPS in Saints Row 3, your car will indicate at turnings. It's a pretty cool detail and one that a lot of you recommended. Well, it turns out that Saints Row the 3rd wasn't the first game to include this revolutionary feature. Burnout Paradise released all the way back in 2008 and allowed you to race in a huge open world. Most races were a case of getting from A to B as quickly as possible, and the game pretty much allowed you to do that in any way you'd like. Now, allowing players the freedom of a city to reach their destination could have left people feeling frustrated. Trying to take a shortcut only to end up taking twice as long as your fellow racers is no one's idea of fun. With that in mind, the devs over at EA also decided to include signalling vehicles, so that you never stray too far from the recommended route. And the vehicles in Paradise even come with a cool sound effect. So the important question is, which game did indicating vehicles better, Saints Row the 3rd or Burnout Paradise? Let me know in the comments. Up next is the latest in a long line of excellent PlayStation exclusives. Ghost of Tsushima sees you take on the role of Jin Sakai, one of the last samurai left alive on the island of Tsushima, after the first Mongol invasion in 1274. In typical PlayStation exclusive fashion, Ghost of Tsushima focuses heavily on story and immersion, and of course, that means that Ghost of Tsushima is home to some really cool details. As mentioned, the game is set during a Mongol invasion, and along your journeys you will often find the dead bodies of people unlucky enough to get in the Mongols' way. Well, if you approach a dead body and swipe down on the touchpad, Jin will do this.
They will pay for what they did. You deserve greater respect than this. May the slain find peace.
So Jin will bow to pay his respects to the dead. It's a really nice touch. Another really cool detail that we've seen in at least one other game before can be seen when Jin walks through long grass. So this may actually be a reference to a scene from the Russell Crowe movie Gladiator, where Crowe's character walks through a wheat field with his hand out just like Jin does. You may also remember a similar detail featuring in Assassin's Creed Origins, where Bayek would run his hand over long grass. Oh, something that is really cool is that Jin will even do this when he is on his horse, which looks awesome. So I feel at this point characters getting dirty in a game is nothing special. Plenty of games have done it over the years, and some games even allow you to wash that dirt off, as seen in Star Wars Battlefront 2. But what I want to praise Ghost of Tsushima for is just how dirty you can get. The final and probably coolest detail I've noticed in Ghost of Tsushima inevitably involves combat. But it's not the badass way Jin can leave groups of enemies in his wake, or even the excellent air assassinations that made me squeal like a girl. Oh no, it's the way that Jin cleans his sword after battle. These animations are so badass, especially the one where Jin flicks the blood off his sword before sheathing it. So now that the dust has settled after the Resident Evil 3 remake, I can confirm the game is great, but just too damn short. The fact that the remake is so good does make the fact that there is so little of it that bit more annoying. But instead of moaning about the game's length and the parts of the original Resident Evil 3 that were cut, I wanted to share a couple of cool details that were missing from the details video I made at the game's launch. The first detail is one of those oddly satisfying details that just looks really cool. At the very beginning of the game, if you approach Jill's noteboard, you will notice this. I don't know why, but the way the papers react to the movement of the fan looks really cool to me. The next detail can also be found relatively early on in the game. Dario Russo was a character that featured in the original Resident Evil 3, and just as he did in that game, Dario decided to try and wait out the infection by hiding away in a container. Well, if you shoot at the container while Dario is inside, he will say this.
You wanna help? Go handcuff yourself to one of those freaks! Damn! She's trying to kill me! Stop that! You're gonna hear from my lawyer! Stop that! My brother-in-law is a lawyer!
So here is a really quick detail that I wanted to share from Borderlands 2, because despite pouring hundreds of hours into the game, I didn't actually know about it. If you drive the Bandit Technical and repeatedly press the horn, there is a chance that this will happen. So this actually took me quite a while to record, as I just couldn't get the sound to play. As I said, I wasn't aware of this jingle, so let me know if you've heard it before. So the final game of today's video is the ever divisive The Last of Us Part 2. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Despite the issues you may have with the game's story, some of which I share by the way, or its characters, there is no denying Naughty Dog are one of the best when it comes to attention to detail. So in typical The Last of Us fashion, the first detail is extremely brutal. I mean, it makes sense, but it's still brutal. If you throw a glass bottle at an enemy's face, this will happen.
Got them! Right over here!
Just let me go!
So rather predictably, the victim of your bottle throwing antics will have shards of glass impaled in their face. So from the really brutal to the really, really cool. Collectibles play a big part in The Last of Us Part 2, with most of them being stored in your backpack for the entirety of your journey. Well, whilst they may be safely tucked away in your backpack, that doesn't mean they're waterproof. Here, let me show you what I mean. So both the can itself and the paper note are now wet after Ellie's dip in the sea. It's a really cool detail and the first time I've seen something like this in a video game. So these final two details come with a spoiler warning. They can be found after the first 2 to 3 hours in the game, so if you've made it past that point or just don't care, then feel free to continue watching. If you haven't made it that far, then best to stop watching now. So after Joel is killed by Abby, Ellie and Dina go to Joel's house to pick some things up. Well, if you take a look at Joel's bedside table, you'll see this. So for those that don't know, Ellie is a big fan of space. Joel even took her to a space exhibit at the museum for her birthday. Knowing how much Ellie loves space, Joel was trying to learn about it too. I don't know why, but this one really hit me in the feels. Though not as much as this next detail. If you go to Joel's closet, you can do this. So if any of you have ever lost someone, you can totally relate to Ellie here, as even the smell of someone who has passed can provide some sense of comfort. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, then a like is really appreciated. If you're a fan of Easter eggs and secrets in games, then perhaps consider subscribing, as that's what this channel is all about. A big thank you to Dylan Winters for telling me about the Borderlands 2 detail, and Benarchy UK for being the first to tell me about the Burnout Paradise detail. If you want to support the channel further, as well as see your name in the credits and get access to videos early, then check the links to my Patreon in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button. A big thank you to the following patrons and YouTube members: Claire Lawrence, Funky Guy, Old Gen Gamer, Nicholas J twice, Kevin Hummett twice, DJX Gaming, and Taco622. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll speak to you all soon.